here, and the government is working with them.
In 1984, a brilliant physicist picked up the phone and revealed a secret he said could cost him his life. A hidden underground base in the New Mexico desert, run by the US military, and something not human. He had photographs, coordinates, and proof. And this recording is one of the last times Paul Bennewitz spoke before his mind shattered. The government called him crazy. After you hear this, I don't think you'll agree with them. Welcome to Mystery Shack, where dark questions rise, strange truths unravel, and reality is rarely what it seems. Today, we follow the trail of a man who claimed to have proof of a secret underground base and paid the ultimate price for speaking out. July 13th, 1984. Jim McCampbell, a UFO researcher, hits the record button. On the other end of the line, Dr. Paul Bennewitz, a physicist, business owner, and investigator for the Aerial Phenomena Research Organization. What Paul was about to describe wasn't just another UFO sighting. It was a story of abduction, mutilation, and a base hidden deep under the New Mexico desert, allegedly run by the US government and extraterrestrials. This is McCampbell's voice, reading from a report on Bennewitz's findings.
Do with a UFO base, capital mutilation, advanced weaponry, contact with aliens, and so forth.
Paul's claims first surfaced in an obscure newsletter called Stigmata. Hidden on page 9 was the testimony of a woman and her son driving near Cimarron, New Mexico, when they saw something they could never forget.
In May of 1980, a most interesting event occurred in northern New Mexico. A mother and her young son were driving on a rural highway near Cimarron, New Mexico. They observed 2 or more craft, and they observed the calf being abducted. Both observers were themselves abducted, taken on separate craft to what was apparently an underground installation, where the woman witnessed the mutilation of the calf.
Inside that underground facility, she claimed to have seen vats containing unidentifiable body parts and the body of a human male. Both she and her son were examined, and later scans allegedly showed small metallic implants inside their bodies. Using hypnosis, field investigation, and what he claimed were communications from the source itself, Paul pinpointed the location, a kilometer beneath the Jicarilla Apache Reservation near Dulce, New Mexico. But this was only the beginning. Paul said he had photographs, coordinates, and proof. And chasing that proof would put him on a collision course with the US intelligence community, a fight he could never win. Days after that first conversation, Jim McCampbell was back on the phone with Paul Bennewitz. This time, Paul closed the door to his office before speaking, a habit he said was becoming necessary.
He has gotten much more deeply involved in it than he ever intended. It has caused him a great deal of trouble from the government intelligence groups.
Paul claimed he wasn't just talking to witnesses. He was visiting the site himself. On one trip, he said, a New Mexico State police officer accompanied him to Archuleta, Mesa. and what they saw still haunted him.
He went with a highway patrol officer, and they saw a UFO take off from a Mesa at the location.
Bennewitz claimed to have photographs, exact coordinates, and even infrared images showing movement on the Mesa. To him, these weren't just scraps of evidence. They marked the doorway to something far bigger, the entrance to a massive underground complex.
This installation is operating jointly as part of an ongoing program of cooperation between the U.S. government and extraterrestrial UFOnauts.
Paul's obsession with Dulce didn't stop at maps and coordinates. From his home in Albuquerque, he began monitoring radio signals. Signals he was convinced were transmissions between alien craft and the underground base.
To produce much better pictures. He set up a monitoring station and observed that UFOs are all over the area. He's also been able to pick up signals and obtain video pictures that are transmissions from the aliens' screens.
Bennewitz said he even built a way to talk back. He devised a hex-coded system. 1 meant no, 2 meant yes, which he ran through his computer, filtering out interference. In his mind, this wasn't just eavesdropping anymore. It was a two-way conversation. But what he described was anything but friendly. The entities were very threatening and malevolent, cutting him off whenever he asked too much. Still, Paul believed they revealed disturbing details. Saucers parked underground, an elevator shaft plunging 1 kilometer into the earth, and small levitating vehicles carrying beings through the base. When he brought his findings to the Air Force Office of Special Investigations, officials didn't laugh him out of the room. Instead, Paul was asked to give multiple presentations at Kirtland Air Force Base, and at least one commander took a helicopter out to Dulce to see the site for himself. But the deeper Paul pushed, the more dangerous it became. His phone began clicking mid-conversation. Strange cars idled outside his home, and before long, the people watching him wouldn't be hiding anymore. The Air Force never dismissed Paul outright. In fact, they listened carefully to his presentations at Kirtland Air Force Base, showing they taking his claims under consideration. But instead of giving him answers, they quietly kept him under surveillance, making sure he didn't dig too deep. Years later, another name would echo the same story. Phil Schneider. If you've seen our earlier video on him, you'll remember his chilling claims of firefights and alien technology beneath Dulce. Bennewitz spoke of multi-level facilities buried into Archuleta Mesa and strange craft moving underground. Schneider described tunnels, subterranean bases, and joint human-alien operations. The overlap between the two accounts is hard to ignore, even if their details differ. And while Paul believed he was uncovering the truth, Air Force insiders later admitted that agents fed him a blend of real intelligence and deliberate lies. The line between fact and disinformation blurred, and paranoia began to take hold. At Kirtland, Paul showed Air Force officers his photographs, films, and signal recordings. Soon after, the Office of Special Investigations began to engage with him, not to validate his work, but to shape it. One name stands out: Richard Doty, an AFOSI agent at Kirtland. Doty has since admitted that the government deliberately fed Paul a mix of truth and disinformation. To Paul, it felt like confirmation that he was on the verge of uncovering a massive secret. But in reality, it was the beginning of a psychological campaign. Each new leak blurred the line between what was real and what was fabricated. And as those lines blurred, Paul's trust in his own senses began to crumble. What Paul didn't realize was that the very people he thought were confirming his discoveries were the ones tightening the noose around his sanity. By the mid-1980s, Paul's world was beginning to collapse. The more information he received, some of it real, some of it planted, the more convinced he became that every signal, every flicker of static, and every light in the sky was evidence of an alien government conspiracy. Friends and family saw the change. To them, Paul no longer looked like a scientist chasing discovery, but a man trapped in obsession. Paul stopped trusting ordinary explanations. Radio bursts, phone clicks, lights overhead. In his mind, all of it proved he was at the center of something enormous and dangerous. But behind the scenes, the disinformation campaign was working. Paul Bennewitz, once a respected physicist and businessman, was being steered toward paranoia, isolation, and collapse. This man set out to prove the existence of aliens, and instead became the center of one of the most chilling disinformation campaigns in UFO history. Whether Dulce was real or not may never be proven. But what is clear is the human cost. A man who trusted the wrong people and lost his mind in the process. So what do you think? Was Paul uncovering the truth, or was he being played all along? Let me know in the comments. If you found this story as unsettling as I did, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. It helps more than you know, and it keeps these forgotten stories alive. Because sometimes, the greatest mysteries aren't out there in the stars. They're right here, hidden in plain sight.